Yes. Okay, welcome everybody to our TeachBoost and ASLF overview training. We are going to just jump right in. So I wanted to take a moment to allow all of our facilitators, got a lot of facilitators today, briefly introduce themselves. So I'll start first. My name is Ben Nakamura. I'm a regional director of culturally responsive teaching and equity. My quote I put there is the antidote is always in the poison. If you're at the supporting admin meeting yesterday, you may have heard me appeal to that quote, just meaning that a lot of times in that very place that we feel is the most challenging or where, there might be some difficulties, that's often where innovation and when innovation is bred and where innovation occurs. So I love that quote. I'm going to pass it off to our next co-facilitator, Dr. Ellison.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Kat Ellison, Superintendent of Equitable Instruction. And actually, the fun fact I'll share is that picture is actually, I cropped out Zach. He was in that too because I didn't want to put him on blast. But Zach and I were trying TeachBoost for the very first time and one of his awesome teachers at Summit. So that's the fun fact I wanted to share about my picture. Pass it over to Melissa.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Great to be with y'all. So I have a quote for us today that I constantly go back to, and it's from the late Representative John Lewis. There's not anything more powerful than the marching feet of a determined people, and just how much we can accomplish when we're all marching together and determined. Is Dr. Webb here? She had a few things going on this morning, so I will pass it over to Miss Shields, Miss Nugent.
Man, y'all starting early. This is all Ben's fault with this whole name situation. All right, anyway, good morning, y'all. I'm Brooke. There's a new title, by the way. So I'm the Regional Manager of Specialized School Support. I'm still learning that. And my quote this morning is not a quote, it's just a truth. It's in any religion you'll find. It's in chapter 1. Breakfast should be eaten at any time of the day. So if your whole family's eating like chicken and potatoes and you want a blueberry muffin, eat the blueberry muffin, okay? I just want to let you guys know that. That is the most important. And Wakanda forever. If you want to smile, go on those links that I sent out on Instagram and on Flipgrid. We've had a lot of great parent videos and teacher and kid videos being submitted in comments about why they believe in their kids. So go on social media and find those because it will make you smile.
Thank you, Ms. Nugent. I agree with you. Breakfast is appropriate for any meal of the day. Often I have like a salmon salad or some sushi in the morning for breakfast. So I agree. I feel you on that 100%, Ms. Shields. Ms. Nugent. I got on this, Ms. Shields, so I apologize. All right, so now I want to introduce our co-facilitators from TeachBoost. First, we have Julie. So I'll pass it over to Julie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm on the East Coast, so it's actually afternoon for me, but loving the wisdom that Brooke is sharing this morning on breakfast. Might have to take a page from your book. Great to be here with you all. I am a customer success manager with the TeachBoost team, which just means that it's my job to make sure TeachBoost is working at Aspire. It's really meeting your needs and just that it's meeting your vision for equitable instruction at Aspire Central Valley. So I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Josh, who's a senior implementation manager on your team. And both of us have been former classroom teachers, former school administrators. So we've been in your shoes and are really excited to help you all with TeachBoost today and just ensuring that you're giving the best feedback possible to your wonderful teachers.
Nice. Thank you, Julie. Okay, so today's objectives. Mr. Crucy Tom, can you read our first objective for today?
You got it. We will reconnect and anchor our conversations today in the why of instructional coaching.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Cortez, Ben Holt Middle, can you read our second objective?
Yes, I can. Leaders will explore and reflect upon the ways the ASLF coaching cycle will support high quality instructional coaching.
Thanks. Thank you. And let me see, Miss Saldana, can you read our last objective for today?
We will develop our understanding of the path, road, map, vision for instructional coaching.
Thank you so much. I was just thinking when I pass it over to Maria, the middle school, my time in middle school, and the kids like, Mr. Nakamura, can I? I was like, I don't know, can I? You're like, well, will you? I don't know. Will I? It's just that there's a little middle school sarcasm that I think certain people appreciate. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. Do some quick introductions that we've been doing. Do a very short community builder. Then Melissa's going to talk about the why for instructional coaching. We're going to get a little bit into the history and the context of the ASLF with Kat, and Brooke is going to share with us some just opportunities that TeachBoost presents. And then that will be a lead in to the work that Julie and Josh are going to do, giving us an overview of the tool and how we can use it to fit for our needs with Aspire. We've been doing a lot of planning, met multiple times to really, we want to make this tool aid in our work with instructional coaching. And I believe that we've done a pretty good job with that, you know, up to this point. And so I think that everybody's going to be really excited about what TeachBoost has to offer for us. And we're going to do some practice and Q&A with Dr. Webb, and then we will, you know, kind of chart our path moving forward with Melissa. So our welcoming activities, I thought since we're talking about coaching, we would talk about the one and only coach right here, the brand. This is the type of coaching we're going to talk about all day. So I'll give you 2 minutes, just reflect upon what this coach means to you. Okay, that was a joke. Here's what we're going to think about. I want you to just on your own, and if you could, like put some bullet points to this, but just describe the attributes of an effective coach, and any type of coach. This is very open-ended this point. Dr. Curtis, good to see you. I just saw you on the screen. So it could be a coach you had growing up, one you currently have, one that you've seen, like observed from afar, and what made them effective, and how did they help you or others that they were coaching. Okay, so this is 2-minute time, reflection on our own, bullet points about, you know, an ideal coach, somebody maybe that you've seen before, or what you think are the characteristics. Okay, so let you do that on your own for 2 minutes, starting now. All right, hope everybody had an opportunity to write some of those attributes of like an effective coach. I'm just going to call on a couple people to share out. What are some of the things that were coming up for you, Michelle, with like an effective coach?
Goal oriented, SMART goals. So actionable goals that are realistic, all the acronyms of SMART goal, with accountability and positivity. I think I picked up the phrase, I believe in you, from a coach. It's something I try to pass on, not just to be, you know, silly, but like genuinely use that in coaching.
All right, appreciate it. Yeah, accountability, the sense of like, I believe that you can do this work, and having some specific goals. Great. Latrice, what are some things you wrote or thinking about?
A coach that is able to also model. So it's not just about telling like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, but it's also like being willing to roll up your sleeves and get down and dirty and jump in the classroom and be like an actual like living example model of like what they are trying to teach, or, you know, coach that individual into becoming.
You mean like somebody who could walk the talk? Is that what you're saying?
And not just talk the talk. Yes.
Like the feet match with the mouth. Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Thank you. All right. Jen Herring, what are some things that you think about when you just think of like an effective coach? What are some things you think about?
I think being able to probe in a positive way, like notice person's strengths and build on those and ask thoughtful questions to help the person that's being coached be able to think of, you know, what they want to work on, even if it's guided.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's like part of that work of coaching, right? Being able to probe and like ask some, you know, questions that get to help us to kind of see things from a different lens, or help us get to new levels of understanding. Those are all really powerful attributes. I'm sure that we've all written a lot more. We're just going to hold that for a while and think with that lens, because really this is the focal point of what we're doing today is coaching. And, you know, we know our theme for the year of believe, belong, become. And I want us to think kind of like with our theme, thinking about each of these: believe, belong, become. How might instructional coaching influence each B in our theme? And so we look at this first one: all scholars are meaningfully engaged in rigorous, standards aligned, culturally responsive academic programming. How could coaching support that? Maria, can you read our the next two, like for belong and become? Can you read both of those out loud to us? Maria Tovar, sorry.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Belong. We will cultivate, communicate that foster communities that foster inclusive, joyful, and safe learning environments. And become, all schools have access to a team of diverse, effective, and thriving professionals who are developed and supported to show up their best and
If you are on time.
enact, sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses, enact culturally responsive and anti-racist practices.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. So as we're thinking about each of these instructional coaching, can instructional coaching help us to get to where we would like to be with our theme? Is what role might instructional coaching have with that? And that leads into our why for instructional coaching. I'm gonna pass it over to Melissa Brookins.
Alrighty. So as we think about just instructional coaching and like what's the purpose and why is it so important, just really tapping into the golden circle. So we're going to go into a quick breakout room into partnerships. And the question is, what is your why for instructional coaching? We'll take a minute to think about that and you'll be able to chat with the partner. So maybe just about there you are, Ben, 3 minutes.
How many participants? Like 3 to 4 per room, or
just partners because it's a shorter.
Oh, partners. Okay, yeah.
Up on you. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So that was more just to like tap into your own personal why. And then I also want to do just a little bit of a connection back to the transformational leadership framework. So Ben, if you're okay to start sharing again.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad. Let's see. Okay, there we go.
All right. So this is like one of the core texts we've had for multiple years. And as we look at different focus areas that we have for this year, we're really trying to hone in around our focus. And when we think about the word observations from the transformational leadership framework, it's actually in there 19 different times where it references observations. And then teacher observations is in there 3 times. So this first lever really takes us back to talent management and performance evaluation. And just the principal action that's listed there is really around data sources to assess teacher practice, and then someone reviewing the evidence for teachers. And we don't have tenure, but like just our teachers for a while. And then when we go into another lever, on the next slide, it also talks about, and this is where it gets more specific around the teacher observations, that as part of the instructional leadership team, one of the principal actions as well is conducting teacher observations and providing feedback. And then again, we see it on the next slide around time management and master schedule as well. And underneath planning and operations is that you also have time built into your calendar as a part of teacher observations. And then go back one more. And then under school culture, when we look at adult and student efficacy, it's just this one doesn't reference teacher observation, but it references opportunities for adults to receive feedback and track their improvement. So just knowing that one of our core frameworks actually references multiple times of how we're engaging in feedback as well, engaging in feedback and teacher observations. And when we think about part of like when I was reflecting on this this short little section is around like just why is instructional coaching really important. I have a quote that is on the next slide that's going to pop up, and this is really like referencing like why do teachers stay, and some of it's around the affirming of practices that they have. So I think observation and feedback is one aspect of teacher retention when we think about it. So if you want to keep the best teachers, treat them like they are best. Few teachers leave an environment where they feel valued, supported, appreciated, and treated like professionals. So really the valued and supported and appreciated can link back to our observation and feedback. And then just lastly, when we think about just instructional coaching, it's really about like seeing our teachers grow, and then our learners, which are our scholars that we have as well. And know how we're centering this, and also just like acknowledging the lived reality of what's happening on our campuses right now with our vacancies that we have and shortages, and know that there are areas that this impacts our ability to be able to do observations, and if we're able to think through this as a way of how is this helping retain teachers and support our scholars as well, would be important. That's a little snippet, and I'm going to give it over to Kat to do some historical stuff too.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, I know from all of the breakouts, like we all have deep passion for like why we want to be great coaches and why our teachers especially deserve to have regular coaching to be their best. And so we in Aspire, we've gone through like lots of little ups and downs with how we think about coaching and how we support it. And so I wanted to just do like a really quick history, a little quick recap. Some of you have lived this and experienced it, others it will be new, but we think it's important for everyone just to have a high level overview of kind of where we've been so we know where we're going. So wanted to start on the next slide. Long time ago. Oh no, before I get there, I wanted to do a quick check for understanding, or not check for understanding, check for how comfortable you feel with the ASLF. So could you just show me on your hands real quick, if you use it and you're like observing teachers every week using the ASLF, maybe give me a 5. If it's brand new, it's a 1. So just kind of show me on your fingers where you feel with your basic level of understanding with the ASLF. Okay, look around everyone. I just want to show we have everywhere from 1 to 5 here, which is beautiful and great. So thank you for showing. And we have teachers that are 1 to 5 too, right? Some that know it probably better than you do, and some that are like brand new to this. So hopefully this history will help you in how you talk a little bit about the ASLF as well. Okay, so on the next slide, a long time ago in a galaxy far away, for you Star Wars fans out there, wanted to share that about 10 years ago, we entered a partnership with, it was called the College Ready Promise. And it was this kind of radical idea with a lot of money behind it. There was this idea that if we incentivize teachers to be better at teaching through financial incentives, that then outcomes for students would improve. And so we created, along with lots of other organizations, the system where teachers were measured on their surveys, on their student data. I see some of you, you're like, yeah, I remember. And then observations. And with that, if you click one more time, Ben, we use a tool called the AIR, the Aspire Instructional Rubric. Do you guys remember that a long time ago? And if you were an observer, we wanted to be fair about it, right? We wanted to like have a really high bar. So as observers, we had to like take tests on the rubric and calibrate. And it was like high stakes when we went into teachers' rooms. And that was the first time that we started like typing notes when we were in teachers' rooms. And it was a big culture shift for us. There were some beautiful things that came from it. So like Purple Planet, we started to videotape high effective teachers, and we had lots of resources. And we had this career pathway ladder where people could have different incentives based on the different ratings they got. And so there were like opportunities for teachers to grow and learn. And then there was a financial incentive, but there were also a lot of negatives that still seep into our culture right now that really promoted some competitiveness. It also promoted individualism, right? Like I want to get good at my score versus collaborating with my colleagues. And also like this, we don't want to be vulnerable and real. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it didn't improve student outcomes the way the initial funding was hoping it would. So we have this legacy that we're going to carry with us. None of us miss those tests or those days. And so we were looking for something as the money kind of came to a close. We were like, okay, let's look for something that will change outcomes for students, because we were so focused on like the teacher moves. And so on the next slide, we found a partner in TNTP, and they had a lot of things that were kind of synergizing with where we were at. And this organization started in 1997, and they do work in lots of different domains, from academics to people and to the environment. And so they provide a lot of support. And so we leaned on them for a little bit of support. And they published 2 texts. On the next slide, you'll see they when Common Core came out, they did some deep learning around like, hey, we actually have to change the way we're thinking. And so they published 2 texts that really looked at what was making an impact for scholars back in 2013 and 14. And so then, based on their key findings, we realized, and TNTP partnered with us and shared that the Common Core standards required that we had higher standards for our students, and they created a rubric and a tool focusing on what students were actually doing in the lesson, and really looking at whether students were having rigorous standards aligned content. So from there, they mapped out their rubric, which we then adopted. And as you can see, it centers in what is happening with students. So instead of looking at just the teacher moves like we did with the AIR, we looked at what is being taught, what is the content? Are we having great text that is rigorous? Are we having high standards? We also thought about how is it being taught from teachers, which is important, but ultimately is our students learning? And so this was a huge shift for us. So when you talk about ASLF, and if you're talking about it with your teachers, the root of it is really our students learning and what are the outcomes for students, which is really, really important for us to anchor in. Okay. On the next area, those of you who've been with us, you know that our ASLF has 5 domains right now. The first 4 come directly from TNTP. And then when we adopted it, we said, we want to make sure we don't lose a focus on being culturally responsive as well. So we created a 5th one. And I think we're still very much in the phase of, is this the right domain? Do we want to make some revisions? But right now we have these 5 domains. And the way it was laid out, which was really important, is you don't use the entire rubric when you go in to observe. Instead, you start at the top and there's an essential question for the domain. So in the culture of learning, when the first thing you should do when you walk into a room is you should think, are the students engaged in the work of the lesson, kind of from start of the lesson to the finish of the lesson? And if the answer is yes, then you can move on to another domain. If the answer is no, then you want to stay there and look at some of the teaching strategies in the rubric itself to help focus. And then after that, essential content is also just as important. So when we went to Relay, we did trainings around instructional coaching. They very much argue that you cannot take away content and culture of learning, that these two, you have to do them side by side. Because you can spend a whole year talking about culture of learning, but if you're not doing rigorous lessons that are standards aligned, kids aren't going to learn. So you really have to be focusing on the first 2 domains first. And so you want to be looking, are they engaged? And then are they working with content that's aligned to the standards? And if the answer is yes to there, then you can go down and go further in your coaching around academic ownership and how they're demonstrating their learning. One of the flaws in this model, though, is culture responsive teaching is down at number 5, right? Which then implies like we're never going to get to that. And so you can see parts of the rubric where it's intertwined, but that might be something that eventually we're going to be wanting to work towards some revisions. But that is how it is laid out right now. And then real quick, for those of you who it's new, on the next slide, just want to make sure you understand the basic function of how each domain is laid out. So under, you can see on the first left, we have 5 different columns that describe student behaviors. And there are headings. I just want to name, they say like ineffective, minimally effective, proficient. As a coach, we don't need to assign these ratings. We don't need to use these terms. It's more about paying attention to the student behaviors. And this is meant to be a tool for us to look at, are students doing this or not, so that we can really think about coaching. And then in the bottom where it says the core teacher skills, those are the skills that we can then coach and practice with our teachers. So if we see that they're not where they want to be up in the indicators above, we come down to these skills to really think like which one of these skills would best support you, and then let's practice it. So that's kind of the overall visual of how you'll find each of the different domains in the rubric. And then the last thing I just want to show here is like how this connects to some of the other coaching work that we've talked about as a region. So in the very first, the box of the 4 different sections, this came out, I want to say about 5 years ago in our region. During Common Core, there were some schools that like just succeeded and like excelled. And we learned both in Aspire and across the nation that the schools that really excelled under the new demands of Common Core had these 4, like leaders were doing these 4 things consistently. They were making time and space for teachers to plan, to like really do that intellectual prep that was needed. They were making time and space to look at data. They were making time and space for professional development to learn new strategies. And they were making time and space for really effective coaching. And so ASLF falls into that bottom bucket around coaching, of being really effective coaching. And we've said in our region that like every teacher, in an ideal world, we're getting to it, but every teacher should go through a coaching cycle with their coach every 2 weeks. And that's what really shows growth and improvement over time. So these leadership moves are kind of like why we want to talk about ASLF. The what is the framework that the ASLF, which helps us identify next steps so that it's like one bite-sized next steps for a teacher. And then how we coach. A lot of us have been through Relay and we've learned the See It, Name It, Do It framework, which is what we're going to show you is connected to TeachBoost today. But I also just want to name, we have lots of other like tools in our coaching toolbox, our coaching toolkit. Lots of us are reading Coaching for Equity. So there's lots of different ways to coach, but ultimately the goal is that ASLF is one of the tools that we use when we are coaching. Okay, so that's a brief history of ASLF. If we had more time, I'd love for you to do a little like elevator pitch, but I just want you to like pause for a second and think. If someone comes to you and says like, why are we using ASLF? Or what is this even about? It's important for us as leaders just to have a little bit of context. And I would say the quick answer is because it's a tool rooted in student outcomes, like what students are actually doing in the classroom. Okay, and I think I'm passing it over to Brooke now.
Hey y'all, so you didn't even have to pass it because Kat just so eloquently stated all of the history of why we got to this point. As many of you all remember last year, Kat said, Brooke, we gotta like figure out how to get ASLF back into teachers' hands. And I was like, well, we need something that's tracking the ASLF so we can use it, and it has to be cool and it has to be pretty and it has to work. And hence our search for the perfect platform. We began using this platform, piloting it at many of our tiered schools last year. Huge shout out to LHA and PCA for letting us play around with different platforms while we were there. And then we called in some principals. I remember distinctly Laura Holly and I being in lots of conversation with TeachBoost folks. And then we piloted it last spring, really, and we're super, super excited about it. So far, we have essentially purchased TeachBoost, which was not an easy feat. We had to take this all the way up to home office and back down and then up again to make sure that this program was compatible with what we're doing. And now that we have TeachBoost, it's been really cool to get random Slacks, emails, and text messages from you all asking about different features, how we can change things, what we can upload. And so we really want to refocus ourselves on exactly what Kat just talked about, which is we're using the ASLF for this particular reason. And we want to focus a lot of our like walkthrough tools and observation tools on the ASLF and the ASLF like solely. So now we're going to actually hear from Julie again to talk about different features and to make sure that we are using this tool with full fidelity. And super excited that now Ben is carrying this work, and glad that Ben is carrying this work now, but I'm also always here if you have any questions. So with that, I think we are now moving on to somebody else, to Kat.
I think it's me, Brooke.
Oh,
but
it's you, Julie? Oh,
It is.
everybody say hi to Julie.
Hi, everyone. Hi,
That's Julie.
everyone.
Okay, bye.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the intro, Brooke. Appreciate it. I'm just going to take a minute here to share my screen. As I said before, Josh and I are super excited to be here with you all. We've been working really closely with Brooke and Ben and Kat to make sure that TeachBoost is really meeting exactly what you all are looking for. And currently we have it loaded with a bunch of different templates, video observation templates, different coaching tools. But today we're really going to be focusing on the See It, Name It, Do It observation cycle that Kat had referenced as just one of the tools in your coaching tool belt that's aligned to the ASLF. And so want to start off with just a few system best practices and different pockets here just to make sure that you all know how to get into TeachBoost, how to log in, how to access the platform. And then we're going to get into the weeds of what's on there. What is the See It, Name It, Do It coaching cycle that we have loaded? And how can you use it to give really targeted feedback to teachers with the ultimate goal of really supporting student outcomes? So first things first, logging in. You can feel free to do this on another tab in your browser if you'd like, just to have it up and running. I even bookmark the page, I always find helpful. But if you go to teachboost.com/login and you type in your email address, you won't need to remember a password. We have this linked with one login. And so all you'll have to do is type in your email address. It'll notice that your Aspire Public Schools email address is noted with one login. And you can sign in with one login and get right on. Again, feel free to bookmark that page. And once you're in, you'll see most likely two different dashboards, your school dashboard, and then this sandbox teacher development dashboard. If you are newer to Aspire, you may not see the Sandbox Teacher Development Dashboard. That's totally fine. That's just our practice sandbox. It's just an extra sort of portal that you can go in and have test observations and different practices done. But it's definitely not necessary. If you'd like access to that, feel free to private message me with your email address and I'll make sure you get on it. But if you don't have it for our purposes today, feel free to just log into your school dashboard. And then once you're on your dashboard, it's going to look like this. It's your main landing page, which is really designed to answer two questions for you. What have you already done in terms of observations? How many classrooms have you gotten in to observe? How many teachers have you observed? What sort of feedback and trends have you been noticing in the coaching notes that you've had? And then the second question is, what do you have coming up? So TeachBoost allows you to schedule out observations. I know sometimes things get thrown in your path where you can't actually get into a classroom that day. Something a little bit more urgent pops up. But as long as you schedule those observations, you're going to be able to come back to those and keep in mind how many teachers you've seen and who you may need to focus a little bit more support. We're not going to go too in depth on the dashboard today, although there are a ton of different tools at your disposal. We're actually going to go into just this one observation cycle, the See It, Name It, Do It cycle. And to find this, you can click New Form up at the top. And so once you get that New Form button, I apologize, I got a lot of pop-ups right here. When you click that New Form button, you're going to have an option to choose a number of different templates. As I noted before, today we are really focusing on one particular cycle, the See It, Name It, Do It cycle. But you'll notice that there are coaching tools, there are forms that teachers can complete about themselves or about other teachers in a peer observation. We have a video tool on TeachBoost for your access that you can upload videos to and observe teachers in that form. And then also walkthrough forms to give quick feedback on both the ASLF and the TLF. Again, when you go into coaching tools, you're going to see our focus today, the See It, Name It, Do It observation cycle. And this cycle, I keep saying cycle instead of template, is because these are going to be multiple forms that are bundled together to create one observation cycle. Let me show you what I mean. And so this cycle here is going to consist of 3 separate forms. You're going to have the coaching observation, where you can take notes, low inference notes of what's happening in the classroom. What are you observing in terms of student engagement? What are you observing in terms of the content in the lesson and how it's aligned to standards and rigorous content? What are you noticing in terms of culturally responsive teaching practices? You can type out all of that for your low inference notes. Take note of the teacher's goals to make that really, really targeted, and also have that ASLF framework to drive your observations. So you can at any time click into that framework to see what you're really observing for, see those look fors and those core teaching practices to really drive your notes and your observations. That's our first part, that coaching observation. You can give feedback during that as well and align it to the ASLF. The next piece is going to be planning for the debrief meeting. And that's going to be a time for you to be really reflective. What are those probing questions that I want to ask in my one-on-one coaching meeting with the teacher? What are the ways that I want to push this teacher in practice? What are the ways that I want to affirm the great things that they're already doing in their classroom that are really supporting students? And so that's sort of where you'll get a chance to be really reflective and really get into the weeds and pull up your sleeves. I think that's, as Latrice had noted, of what can I do to make sure that I'm growing this teacher that I'm working with today. And then that last step, the teacher reflection and next steps. Now it's the teacher's turn. After that debrief meeting, the teacher gets to reflect, internalize what they're going to do as next steps. Where in the ASLF are they going to really support their practice? And what action steps are they looking to turn around right away to make sure that their practice is improving for students that are right in front of them that day? And so just really quickly here to stamp all of these 3 different templates within this cycle. First is going to be that coaching observation where you can take notes, tag to the ASLF, and then give that really targeted feedback that's action oriented. And then planning for the debrief. What are the areas that you want to stamp as strengths, areas for growth, and then what are the next steps going to be from your time with coaching this teacher? And then last but not least, how can we really support teacher ownership of the feedback and really follow through and ensure that they're improving their instruction for students in this teacher reflection and next steps portion? Awesome. So I'm actually going to pass it to my colleague, Josh. I'm going to stop sharing so that he can drive here, but we're going to go into just a live demonstration of what this looks like on TeachBoost to really give you an idea of how this tool can be used in your everyday. So without further ado, I'll kick it to Josh.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Julie. Happy to be here with you all. I am going to just kind of show a live example of what Julie just covered with this cycle here. So a little bit of repeat information as we go through these first steps. Pretty quickly here, we're going to find the new form button at the top of our dashboard, and then we're going to select who is this activity about. Once we get there, we're going to determine which activity do we want to create. So that cycle lives in the coaching tools folder here. We see the see it, name it, do it cycle. And as Julie mentioned, there are 3 components here. All 3 of these need to get scheduled at once. You can always go back in and change the dates or times if you need to, but the dates for all 3 of these activities are required as you are scheduling them. So maybe the observation is going to happen today, and then I'm going to plan for the debrief a little bit later today, and then I want the teacher to actually reflect on this tomorrow. So all 3 of those there. If I want to email the teacher, letting them know that all of this is happening and coming up, I can select this box down here and type them a little message. And as soon as I start this, it's going to send them that email saying, hey, teacher, your see it, name it, do it cycle is coming up. And you can log in and start preparing for your reflection if you need to. So as soon as we do that, we're going to start this. And it's going to take us into our cycle summary here. So again, 3 different components. And what I'm looking at here is who is responsible for completing each of these and who is the activity actually about. So the first 2 activities, again, the observation and then the planning, those are activities that I am responsible for as the administrator. So I'm actually the one creating and filling in and editing all of those 2 activities. And then that teacher reflection, you can see that that teacher reflection has the teacher's name listed in both the for and by lines. That's because that's something that they are creating on their own. So at this point, when a teacher logs in, they're going to see a scheduled teacher reflection and next step form on their dashboard. It will live there until they're ready to go in and start it. but they will have the ability to edit that form, unlike these first two, which need to be shared with them in order for them to see that information. So let's dive in. Let's go ahead and see what these forms look like in practice. So the coaching observation is first. When I start this, it's going to pull up a sketch notes pad here for me. So at its simplest form, this is an observation. You're going in and you're taking all of your notes about what you're seeing and hearing in the classroom. So I'm just going to come in here, and as I move line to line, you can see that on the left-hand side, it's time-stamping those notes for me automatically. And it's actually already set here to be super granular and show me those seconds here as well. So I'm just kind of moving through and typing in all of the notes about what I'm seeing and hearing in the classroom. I do have some formatting options at the top. So if I need something to stand out, I can bold, italicize, underline it. And one thing that folks like, especially during conversations between teachers and students, is this speech bubble teacher-student conversation chart. So when I click on that, it's going to allow me to get some formatting around who is the one actually talking or doing whatever action it is. So the teacher might ask a question, and then the student gives an answer, and then the teacher asks a follow-up, and then the student kind of answers that question again. If I need another student line, really easy to come up here and add a second student line in, and then I can keep taking my notes as it timestamps. So really simple there as I'm going through and taking those notes. If I need to get out of that conversation, I'm just gonna hit the down arrow on my keyboard. It pops me out, and now I can continue taking my notes. Other things that can be done on this page, there is a spell checker. There is also some preferences in this little wrench icon here. So if I want to pause timestamping because somebody came in and interrupted me, or a student came over and asked me a question, I can pause those timestamping. I can also, if I don't like the seconds, I just want to see hours and minutes, I can do that. And then if I like all of my teacher-student conversation happening in one column rather than two, that's another option for you. I find that as you get better and better at this, these keyboard shortcuts come in handy. It should know what operating system you're using and should give you the shortcuts for those here. So just wanted to point out those live up there as well. As we start using the system more robustly, if goals and next steps are things that are going to be added in for this teacher, those are going to show up in the bottom right corner. So I know next steps is something that you all are focused on as an organization. If this teacher already had some next steps assigned to them, they would show up here letting you know, maybe that's an area where I want to focus my observation on because that's something that they're trying to get better in, or that's an area where they're focused on right now. So you would see those pop up in the bottom corner. And then I also see the framework here. And this is just kind of giving me an overview of those 5 domains, letting me know that these are some of the things that I should be looking for. All right, so 3 steps to this form. The first one is actually taking all of your notes during the observation. And now we're going to actually align these notes to these 5 areas of the framework. So all I'm going to do is highlight my notes on the left and then click on the area where it aligns. So this might be a really good example of essential content. This might be a really good example of demonstration of learning. This conversation here might actually be a not so good example of culture of learning, but I'm going to tag it because I'm going to give them some specific feedback on the next page there. So I can highlight the same notes and align them to multiple areas. I can leave it blank if this has no meaning and doesn't align at all. The color coding is really just kind of breaking down between the 5 indicators. So really just aligning all of your notes to the different areas of the framework. One thing I want to point out is this little eyeball indicator. These are your look fors. And so if I click into there, it doesn't look like any are loaded right here, which I think is wrong. I think we do have some look fors in there. So I'm going to double check on that for you all. But that should be some language that you can use to kind of help understand what should we be seeing in each of these areas. All right, so we took our notes, we've aligned all of our notes to these areas. Now it's time to actually give our feedback. The third little bubble at the top here. And you're going to select each of these individually. So let's start with number 1. Here is the evidence that I highlighted from my observation. And now it's time to actually come in and give my feedback here. So as I'm giving my feedback, I am able to just kind of type into this box and apply any information or any feedback that I have for the teacher. So I know some of this is going to come out in the conversations that you're having with the teachers during your next meeting, but if you wanted to provide just some simple feedback here in each of these boxes, that's what you would do here. We also have the ability to give ratings. I apologize that I hopped in a little late, so I'm not sure what the guidance is around giving ratings during these observations, but nothing on TeachBoost is ever going to be required of you from a system perspective. So if it is in what your all's practice is to give ratings here because you want teachers to know where they stand and you want to be able to track that for data purposes, you certainly could come in and give a rating on your scale here. If that's not something you're doing on these coaching observations, we skip this and then we just keep on going to give our feedback in these other areas. So number 2, number 3, number 4, I'm going to give a couple of ratings just so we can have those pop up in our reports, and then number 5 as well. You can also see at the bottom of all of these, there's an ability to give next steps and attach files. So if you have a specific next step that directly aligns to, culturally responsive teaching, this is where you would be able to do that. It's one place where you'd be able to do it. There are a few different places. So I might come in here and I might want, the next time that you plan a lesson, I want you to explicitly write out all of the culturally responsive elements that you plan on teaching during that lesson, something like that. And I would just give it a quick due date and save it. Easy enough. The same thing for attachments here. If there's a picture you took during that observation, if there is, a lesson plan or a piece of student work or a handout or any of those things that you want to attach as evidence for this, you can do that here, and you can do that in each of these separate individual areas. So there's a lot going on this form. Again, a lot of different steps here. We're taking all of our notes. We are then aligning those notes to the framework. And then we're finally able to kind of come here and give our feedback and our next steps and those sorts of things. Before I kind of get to the next step where we're actually going to share this out with teachers, I want to pause and see if there are any questions.
Chelsea, I see your question in the chat. I just want to say out loud, I would actually recommend that you don't do next steps until you meet with the teacher. I think for this cycle, like you come up with the next steps together, and there's a place in the teacher reflection where they can identify their next steps.
Perfect. And I will definitely show you where there are some other places to give those next steps.
Josh, I apologize if this is something you went over. I had a hard time logging in, so I was trying to log in while you were talking, so I apologize. But I was wondering if, I'm a program specialist, so if I am doing a co-observation with the principal and we're observing the same teacher, is there a way for us to be typing into this same form? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Or would we have separate ones?
You would need to have separate forms. So this does not work like a Google Doc where you can both be in the same document at the same time taking your notes. In fact, if you try to click into an observation that is already open in another place, it's going to give you a big warning that says you may lose notes if you do this. Do you want to proceed or do you want to go back to safety? So we definitely recommend in those scenarios opening 2 different observations to take those notes. The other thing is we see some folks don't want teachers to have to go to 2 different places to look for their feedback. So there's kind of a lead observer, and then the other observer is just kind of taking notes in a Word document or something as they're going through, and they share that out, which can then be attached to this actual observation. All right. Cool. Let's keep on, make sure there's nothing else. Perfect. All right. So once we've gone through these steps here, we are going to come in and save and exit. That's the last button up there at the top. And that takes us to a form summary page. So this is really just kind of summarizing everything that we've done on that observation. If I click the sketch notes pad here, this is going to show me all of my notes. And then we are going to see our feedback, our ratings, our evidence, all of that good stuff here. If there were attachments from those previous pages, those would show up here. You can also attach additional files from this link here. And we've got our timeline down the side. So this is just kind of showing us that, we've scheduled this with the teacher by email. We're currently in progress, but we have not completed or shared this out yet. So once this all looks good, now is the time to go ahead and share that out. And again, the timing of this is completely up to you. So if it doesn't make sense to share this with the teacher until you're just getting ready to meet with them a little bit later, if you don't necessarily want them to have all of this information ahead of time, you want to talk through it together, or it was maybe a particularly bad observation, it didn't go very well, and you don't want them to have to think about that ahead of time, you can certainly hold off on sharing this until later and come back into the form. But I would say for the most part, giving the teacher a little bit of a heads up on the notes that you kind of just took and the feedback, all of that, you can certainly do that ahead of time. So as soon as we're done, I'm going to come up and complete this form. That's the green button at the top. And now we have a bunch of different sharing options. So by default, these 3 boxes are going to be selected. The first one is sharing this form with the teacher on TeachBoost. So do you want them to be able to see this form on TeachBoost? Yes or no? That's this first box here. The next box is not selected by default. We find that most folks don't want to share their full just kind of script of notes with teachers. Sometimes they're using shorthand, they're using other kind of abbreviations that don't always make sense to teachers, and they really just want to share out the areas that were tagged as evidence. So by default, this is deselected. Teachers will not see your just kind of script. However, you certainly can share that. And if it turns out that it's in your practice more times than not, as an organization, that you do want to share these out, then we can have that box selected by default rather than deselected. Showing the ratings, this is pretty self-explanatory and gets to what Julie mentioned in the chat box there. Sometimes it makes sense to give those ratings, but that you don't actually want to share them with the teacher. You want to collect them for your own internal purposes to spot school-wide trends on how teachers are doing at your school or in your organization. So you would actually give those ratings during the observation, but we would hide them from the teacher. And if we do that, I'll show you the difference between what you see and what the teacher sees here in just a second. And then this bottom one is going to send them an email notification. So teachers are not always logging into TeachBoost as often as administrators are. It's sometimes nice to send them a quick email letting them know, hey, your feedback for this observation is up on TeachBoost. Go ahead and take a look at it. And that's what this bottom box would do. So I'm going to go ahead and leave these options shared for now and then complete the form. When I do that, it turns green, shows it as complete, and it also shows me that the ratings have been hidden from this form. So this is what I'm seeing as an administrator. I see the evidence, the feedback, and the ratings. But if I come up to my actions button and I preview this as a teacher, I see that ratings piece disappears and those sketch notes disappear. And that's because I decided not to share those with the teacher. Going to look at the chat here quickly for some questions, and then we'll move on to the next part of this cycle. If a co-observer uploads their observation notes, can those also be tagged? Not as an attachment. If you're in the situation where you're the co-observer, you can add that entire document. I'm going to reopen this form really quickly. If you ever need to go in and make changes, that reopen button always takes you back in. You can attach a file to the sketch notes page here. So that's maybe a good place to do it, but it wouldn't let you highlight parts of that document and then tag them to the framework. You would only be able to tag the entire document itself and do that as well. You could certainly paste the document in. So if you came in here and these were the notes for Observer 1, and then you just come in and this is Observer 2 notes, and then we could copy and paste all of the notes down here, then you could certainly use those notes to tag. So you would just want to coordinate that with your co-observer, which is, I'm owning this document, send me your notes, I'll paste them in, and then we can go through and do the alignment and all of the rest of the stuff on the form. So that's a really good workaround for that co-observer situation. PDF, yeah, absolutely. So I'm coming back to the form. I'm going to just complete this form again. Once I reopened it, I do need to recomplete it. And then up in the actions button, The very first one here is the print preview button. And this is going to do a couple of things for you. One, it's going to format all of your notes in kind of a nice little formatted PDF, your little logo at the top there. Here's all of the evidence, feedback, and ratings that I gave. And any next steps will show up down at the bottom as well. This also does allow you to include signature lines. I'm not sure if that's something you're going to be looking at for these observations or not, but this is where you could electronically sign this as well. And then if we click print, the default option, at least for me on my computer, is to save as a PDF. You could always just print this out as well too, but that's how you would get a PDF version of this. If you included your sketch notes here, you can see there's a checkbox for them. If I check that, then those are going to show up for me on this page as well up at the top. Just share celebratory feedback rather than doing the sticky note thing. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but I'm happy to give it a shot if, Chelsea, you want to maybe ask it a slightly different way?
So oftentimes when we go into classrooms to observe, we'll leave like folks will leave like a sticky note, just like celebrating and thanking the teacher. And you had mentioned like, you don't have to directly send the feedback right away. So I'm just wondering if the feedback also includes like constructive feedback. Is there a way that we could just send like a teacher a note of like, thank you for letting me pop into your class today, da 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 da, like just so then they're not left kind of like hanging versus like doing it on the computer and then writing a sticky note. I don't know if that's like something that we need to talk about as like a region.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Not possible kind of within the confines of TeachBoost right now. There's no way to share some feedback without sharing all of the feedback that you've given. One thing that we see folks sometimes do, which again isn't really going to be helpful, is we use this add summary text field. That is generally where I see folks do exactly what you said, which is, thanks so much for letting me in your classroom. I really like the way that you did these 3 things. Looking forward to debriefing with you tomorrow. This is the area where I generally recommend folks to add that sort of language. The problem, which doesn't solve your question, is when I share this form, it's going to share that along with all of this evidence and feedback that I've already given. So there's no way to just share like a positive sticky note. Although I love that idea, I'm not sure I've ever heard that feedback come through before. And I'm going to send that along to our product team because I really like that idea.
And can I just add a quick note? Chelsea, we're going to also talk about like there's other tools besides the see it, name it, do it cycle. Like there's the walkthrough tools and like things that's like for regional teammates that we might want to consider doing a little bit differently. But I think for this cycle, teachers probably know you're coming. And so I think when you share the feedback, you can say something and be like, oh, thanks for having us. But we'll look at some of those other options too later on. So I just wanted to give a quick plug because there's lots of really cool features in here too.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, that's super helpful. This is, again, just one tool that is set up for you. There are a bunch of others that are set up to do kind of that more 5, 10, 15-minute observation, quick feedback. Thank you for letting me in, those sorts of things as well. So maybe just in a different tool rather than this. All right, so that's part 1 of the 3-part cycle. When I jump back to my cycle, I can see that because we've marked this as complete, it turns green, and I'm still now waiting for these other 2. If I go back to my dashboard, just to show you where you can find all of these activities, a lot of places. One is on the calendar, so we can see all of the activities we've scheduled or completed here on the calendar. Another place is in the all forms box here. When I click there, it's going to show me here is the coaching observation I just completed. And then here are some of the other forms. Looks like Angelina's been in playing around with me as well, which is great to see. So she's got a coaching cycle here as well. All right, so let's jump into part 2. Part 2 is also owned by you, and this is going to be planning for the debrief. This uses a different type of form. We call it a QA form, but it basically allows you to kind of see the scaffolded list of questions you should be thinking about as you're planning for this debrief, and just take some quick notes on what are some of the things you might want to say. So I'm going to start this form. And This looks a little different. So front page is just going to confirm who the teacher was, who the observer was, and the date. And then there are 3 different pages down the left-hand side. See it, action step, and then the plan, practice, and follow-up. So here is the first page here. This is going to, again, just kind of have your scaffolded sets of questions. This is taken directly from the model documents that were sent over to us. And it just provides you a space to take all of these notes. So seeing the success, going back, reflecting on the observation, what are some of the things that you saw there? As Julie was mentioning in the chat box, this is an internal kind of planning document. It's not something that necessarily needs to be shared out with the teacher. It's really just getting you in the mindset of giving good feedback to the teachers. So I'm just going to come through. I'm going to scroll through each of these. Here's the see the success. Here's the see the model with all of that language. See the gap. Again, some probing questions and some examples of what you might be looking for or might be asking. And then a couple other pages on the side, the action step. And finally, the plan, practice, follow up. So just more prompting on what are some of the things you might be looking for as you go through and get ready for your debrief with the teacher. There is a lot of scaffolded information on all of these questions. Kat, I would imagine that we're not necessarily taking notes on each one of these bullet points, that this is really just a guide as the observers are going through. Is that right?
Yeah, and just to to bring us back, when we did the training with Relay, like a lot of us would just highlight the question that we wanted to ask. And so I know we can't like highlight in this feature, but what I would do is I would you're not going to ask all of these questions. So I would just think like the one I'm going to, there, copy and paste it. So it's more like just thinking of like, how am I going to ask the question? It's just, again, meant to be like a tool or a support for you as you're thinking about your feedback.
Perfect. Yeah, we can't highlight, but copy and paste is pretty easy from those, and you can certainly just kind of make a note of some of the things that you want to focus on. So that's really this a planning document for you, your own purposes here. When we're all kind of done looking at all of these different areas, save and exit buttons in the top right corner. This page looks familiar. This looks just like the form summary page previously. In this instance, when I come through here and just kind of make sure that everything looks okay, maybe there's something I want to attach here, maybe not. When I complete this form, this is something that you probably want to deselect here, is not sharing this out. I'm not sure it makes sense for you and your notes to kind of share that out with the teacher. You certainly can. Anything is certainly allowed to be shared out with the teacher if you think it's helpful for them to see what questions you're going to be focusing on during that conversation. You'll kind of figure out whatever your own best practices there are. But in this instance, it sounds like I'm going to keep this for myself and I'm not going to share it with the teacher. So when I complete this form, I get to see it, but the teacher, when they log into their dashboard, will not see this form. I'll pause there, see if there are other questions for me or the Aspire team on this document. All right, let's finish this out then. So the last piece of this is the teacher reflection and next steps page. And again, the teacher's name is the one that is listed on this form. So they are the ones that are going to be kind of going in and completing this. I'm going to pretend that I'm a teacher just so I can show you what the form looks like here. But this is where the teacher will kind of come in and they will be the ones starting their reflection. So when the teacher logs in, their dashboard looks a little bit different than the admin dashboard does, but they will be able to click into this form and come to the teacher reflections page. So again, just a quick note that it should be completed prior to the debrief meeting. And then they're just going to come in here and answer a few questions. Based on your PLP, what are you currently working on? Learning target of this lesson, some bright spots, question about student data. Were there any surprises during the lesson? And then how would you reteach this if you could make some changes? So just a set of questions for teachers to kind of reflect on the lesson that they taught that day. And then the second page here, this is where we actually are going to take some notes during that debrief meeting. So what are all of the action steps that, what are all the steps that make the action step come alive? Write the precise action step. That's the first question here. And so in order to take advantage of TeachBoost's built-in next step tool. Again, the benefits of that is that those next steps show up directly on a teacher's dashboard, and you are able to see those during the observation piece of your observation. This add next step button is going to be the one that you want to click. So write the precise action step. There's no text box there because we want you using this next step tool. So just like I showed you earlier, next step, your first next step might be to have the teacher, partner with a teacher who did this same exact thing really well and see what they are doing, something like that. So that we want to have happen by the end of the month. And I can save that next step here. You can set as many next steps here as you want. The teacher can set their own next steps. This is a real collaborative process between you and the teacher, kind of laying out what are the things that we need to work on moving forward. So what, how, and when, those are your 3 questions for this area here. How am I going to do this? I'm going to make sure I meet with the teacher. I'm going to then rewrite a lesson plan, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can then just kind of plan out when is our next observation, when is the next time we're going to get together. You can just kind of type that all out here, or say you're going to make a plan to do this next week, whatever makes the most sense for you all. So that is pretty simple. Again, form summary page here. In this instance, the teacher is the one who gets to determine whether this form is complete or not. You can also come in and click this button, but then it's going to ask you to select the administrator that you want to directly share this with. This is a little different because obviously during this, you're actually meeting with your coach or administrator in this instance, and they're going to have access to it regardless of whether you've directly shared it with them or not. That just kind of sends you all a notification via email that it's kind of been finished. So in that case, maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe we're just going to come in here and complete the form and finish out our cycle. Really quickly, just want to show a quick view on what this might look like from the teacher perspective. So from your perspective, now all of those forms are complete. We see that the forms have been marked as complete in the all forms list. They show up here. I can always click back into them if I need to. From the teacher's perspective, what I can see is they are going to see those activities show up in their recent forms list. So this is not a true view of one particular user, but this does show you what the teacher view looks like. So in this instance, they have their recent forms area. Any goals or next steps that have been created for them will show up here on the right-hand side. And then they can come in and click into any form that has been directly shared with them. So just kind of a quick view of what the teacher might see from their perspective. Looking through the questions here, Julie, do we have a plan for putting together? I know this is being recorded, so you'll have this to kind of go back and look at, but we can certainly put together a guide, as Julie just mentioned.
Yeah, same page, Josh. As you were saying it, I was typing it. We'll put together, I'll put something together where you all have this in writing, a really clear step-by-step with screenshots, and I'll send that over to the team.
Awesome. Julie, is there anything else I should cover while I've got control here?
Josh, if you wouldn't mind just showing the next steps smart list, I think that could be a really great way to show how all these next steps are in one place for coaches to really see who's accomplishing those and where they may need to focus on again.
Absolutely. So under reports, a couple of reports that I'm sure you all will be really excited to dive into as you get started with this work. But the next steps list is in our middle column here, next steps smart list. And this is going to pull up a list of all of the next steps. This is filterable by who it's been assigned to. So if we're just looking for a particular teacher, we can pull up their next steps and it would show me the status, whether it's been marked as complete or not, if it has a due date, when that is, lots of different filtering and sorting options here. Completed tasks get archived year by year. So all of your information is going to live within a school year. And then as we roll over to next year, they will all technically get quote unquote archived, but for now, they will just kind of show up as completed. So if we marked this action step here as complete, when we go back to our next steps, we can see they've been marked as complete. Those completed action steps still do show up on the teacher's dashboard. They still do show up here so that we've got a record that they happened, but they will disappear kind of as we roll over for next year. And then if you are giving ratings, just really quickly, I think there was a slide on the heat map coming up on the PowerPoint as well, but the ratings data all rolls up into the 2 reports located in this first column. And just a quick preview here, you're going to see the 5 domains across the top. And then what we're seeing for each of these boxes is an average of the ratings in each of those areas. So for teacher 1, they've been rated 3 times, and they have an average of a 3.75 in number 1 there. So you can see this is kind of a bare bones view of this, but as you were looking at this for a school with many more teachers, you'd start to see those averages show up here at the school level at the top. And we can really use this data to dive into some professional development as a school. In this instance, we're doing pretty well in domains 1 and 5. Number 2 here, which as I can see is, if I hover over it long enough, essential content. So that might be an area where we want to focus as a school, because as a school, we're struggling there. Definitely a lot of information to all cover at once. The 3 parts of that cycle all look very different. So, you know, we are around to kind of help support however we can with documents, resources, all of those good things. But we find that folks pick it up pretty quickly usually. So once you've been through this once or twice, the cycle should be pretty intuitive from there on out, and teachers seem to pick it up pretty fast as well. So Julie, I'll turn it back over to you, but hopefully this was helpful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. And just as Josh mentioned, we know it's a lot of information, but we're really excited for you all to get on TeachBoost, start exploring. We find it pretty user-friendly. And so I imagine once you get on and start clicking around, you can't break it, and you'll have some good feedback for us as well. I'm actually going to pass it back to the Aspire team. We're almost done for our time today. Thank you all for having us.
Thank you, Julie and Josh. I appreciate it, and I feel like that was very thorough. We went through a lot of like the practice and the Q&A and things embedded into that moment. If there's anybody, if you have not gotten on already, if you don't have access to TeachBoost, please let me or Julie know, so then we can figure out how to make sure you get that access. And I'm also feeling like, based on the responses, that we might need additional time just to do some Q&A and like, you know, just open the space. And so our team will gather and put forward a couple times that we can just hold the space by Zoom, so then you can jump in and ask questions as you like. I'm going to pass it over to Melissa now, just to kind of give us like a view of where we're going moving forward with our coaching.
Okay, before you show the screen, Ben, I want to just do a quick, just like temperature check. If you were to put a color or a word on the mood meter, how are you feeling in this moment? Feel free to drop it in the chat box. And after you drop it in the chat box, I want you to take 2 deep breaths. All right, so I see it coming through, and we're in a couple of different places. And I just want to acknowledge, like, whatever you're like feeling in this moment is valid. Like, there's not one place that you're supposed to be. And we went from having Ed Reflect several years ago, where we were capturing observation and notes in there. Then we didn't have Ed Reflect, and we also have like systems that have been developed at the school, to now we're introducing a new system as well. And when we think of just like the overview that we just had, we kind of, I would say we got the, I don't know if the Cadillac version is the right way to say it, but we kind of saw like the full extent of where TeachBoost can be utilized, right? And at like, that might be where we're at in a couple of months, or some of you might be there already and can like already visualize and see how we're doing that. But just knowing that like there's so many different like capabilities of utilizing TeachBoost. And it's not about getting it perfect right now. It's not about getting it right. It's about trying it on. So we're gonna do some trying it on right now. And Ben, if you can go ahead, or not right now, we're gonna try it on. I'm gonna let you know how we're gonna try it on. So Ben, if you can go ahead and share the screen. And we got 2 minutes left. So upcoming we have from our PLP window, we have the first observation that's going to happen November 30th to February 19th. And we're looking for you to record at least one observations for all of your teachers, including your educations. Oh, I put quantum. Quantum must have been in my mind. We'll change that, including education specialists in TeachBoost. And you can utilize this observation that you're already going to be planned to do with your teachers to have TeachBoost. TeachBoost as your tool to be able to utilize it. In addition, the principal supervisor is going to try this on with you during site visits as well. And then as Kat said, next Tuesday, we're going to get some practice with it. So I just want to, I know some of us are like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I got this. And some are like, whoa, I'm like super overwhelmed. Why are you adding one more thing on my plate? And we're learning this right now, and we're going to get through this piece of it. And I remember, if you were here during Ed Reflect days, I remember it took me a really long time to like get used to, and I felt a lot of stress and like anxiety before I got to that place where I understood like, oh, okay, I got this down. I understand it. And we went through the history, right? So this is what we're looking for as we try it on moving forward. And as we officially like close out our time frame for today, Ben, feel free to go to the next slide. Please respond to one of the below, either via chat or unmute. What are my next steps? Who do I want to connect with on this topic? Or a word or phrase that reflects how you feel about this information moving forward. Thanks, Katie, for getting us started, and Michelle. All right, so after you add in to the chat box, if you want to unmute, just want to send you a fabulous like rest of your day. We will send out the recording as well to everybody, and just thank you to TeachBoost for being here with us, Julie and Josh, and thank you all for engaging, and we will see you all again soon. See you later.
Thanks, y'all.